Hi, it's Alison from Lilypads. This week we've been looking at the gender pain gap, and so how a male and a female in the same level of pain might get treated differently. And so in our first blog of the week we dived into what does that difference look like, what are some of the physiological differences in that we we experience pain differently and we metabolize painkillers differently, and often it's built for our reference man and therefore doesn't take into the fact that we've all got very different body shapes. Sometimes it's to do with the fact that we imagine that women are emotional and therefore couldn't possibly explain how much pain they're in. And sometimes there's a bazillion other factors. Whereas I'm hoping from the level of change in my voice you will understood those were completely sarcastic, and while they're things that some people experience, it drives me mental on a personal note, which is why I'm doing the video, because this video is all about how I've experienced it. And so first and foremost, these are my experiences, and even from talking to friends and co-workers about this and realizing that my experiences are very much tailored to the fact I'm young, I'm female, I'm within a BMI range that's considered normal sometimes. And so all of those change my experience. I'm speaking English as a first language if I'm in a surgery in the UK. So what does that all affects the stories I'm going to tell, but also maybe you're different in some aspect watching this and you can see, oh, never thought about it that way. And that this is a chance to realize that we all can present with the same thing, or we can see or have the same environment, but how we're treated in it, how we feel in it, what it looks like to us can be completely different. And it's a chance to kind of unpack that and then use that to talk to other people and be like, oh, how did you experience this? And so like the really nice example in my head that's like very definitive was when we were like final 2 years at school. There was a blood donation centre and we could all go and give blood. And for some reason we were all going to, like all of my group of friends were going to give it on like a Tuesday afternoon. And we got in, and when you're under 20 and you're female, they ask you what your height and your weight is. And unless you're over a certain threshold, you can't give blood. Your chance of fainting is too high, and I'm sure there's other things and I can't really remember them. And out of my entire group, I was the only one that was too small to do it. That to me was like, well, it sucks and I have to go and do PE, but fair dues, I see your logic. I'm not going to argue with it. But to everyone else, it was that chance of like, is she, because it's based on your BMI, really? Like our skinniest person? You can see what kind of school I was in. And it was weird because it was like, well, actually it was done because I'm our littlest person. But the same thing, different experience. The nurses and everyone there were absolutely lovely and were just kind of like, you're too little. I'm not even sure they call me little. I'm pretty sure I just gave it that note. You know, your chance of fainting is too high. This isn't a good idea for you to do it, and therefore you're not allowed, blah, blah, blah. And it was like, yeah, totally rational. It was experiences of my peers who were very much like, I don't think that's right, that made it, oh, I feel kind of icky about this. And that thought of, how did we all experience that very similar thing? And so that got me thinking about all the other times that we experience different kind of pain, or how what we look like or talk like affects it. And also how we talk about, like, stereotypically, when a guy presents in pain, he will use how it's going to affect him at work, and a woman will use how it will affect him personally. And then they get rated differently. And realistically, we're both going to be affected by both. We just talk about them differently. And I was thinking, I broke my hand earlier this year. I came off my bike, so I ended up in A&E, or minor injuries if you want to get really technical. And I was in a suit because I'd just come from a meeting. And when they pulled it back into place and did all of that, they said to me, like, how are you going to cope? It's now in a wee thingy for, I can't remember now, like 6 weeks or something. And I was like, oh, cooking's going to be a pain, but I live with 2 other people, so they'll be able to help, and I'm sure they'll be able to help me around the house, so I'll be fine. And then I started reading this, and I'd gone home and spoken to them, my male flatmate's thing was like, oh, how are you going to cope at work? I was like, oh, also good question. I'm just going to have to do lots of verbal stuff and get the computer to annotate it, or transcribe it even, and do different tasks and learn how to do it with one hand. And I'm going to cope. But that wasn't the response I gave the doctor. But it could have been, because they were also my experiences. And it got me thinking, well, if I turned up in A&E and I didn't look like I was at work, I was wearing leggings because that's what I'd cycled home from in a meeting, which probably would have been a lot more practical, or because I was a student, I worked at a place that I didn't need to be wearing that, I'd chosen to wear something else differently that day, would that have changed what I felt like in A&E? I mean, I felt daft in my blazer and I was kind of heartbroken that I hurt it. But what did that mean? Would it have changed how I'd spoken about it if I had used, the words that my flatmate then got out of me of like, oh, well, work's going to be different, but I'll probably be able to do it. What does that all look like? And that to me is fascinating in the way that how we talk. And it was fascinating looking at other things of that. As young and female, I'm also socialised to care about how I look, make sure I've got some makeup on, I've got washed hair, and I've nice clothes and blah 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 blah. And therefore how I present a lot of the time is going to be really different. And we being society, have this kind of bias that pretty people can't be in pain because we've somewhere decided that if you're in pain or you're disabled, you look physically different. Don't get me. And I was thinking, oh, well then how would it look? If I was at home, maybe not at home, in the office, on the street, somewhere, and I was me made up versus me in joggy bottoms in the same level of pain. How would people treat me differently? How would they perceive and talk about that pain? What would that look like? Don't know, I have not run this as an experiment, but it did get me thinking, oh, we do have really different perceptions on like what you look like and how much pain you should be in and what is normal and not normal. Which then got me thinking about, spurred on by all the research, our own thresholds. And so there's also stuff about most women have some form of period pain each month, and that will give you a monthly bar of how much pain, whereas if you don't have that, then your pain can feel quite different because you don't have that monthly like, oh yeah, this is more or less than my period pain, what does that look like? And then from 2 weeks ago, chatting to everyone about my period pain video, and lots of guys being like, oh yeah, I've had that with my girlfriend, where she'll be like in screaming agony, and I'm going, I think it's time we like take you to a doctor or we do something. You seem like you're in a lot of pain. And her being like, it's period pain. I've accepted that this is my normal. And that, like, well, what does that do for other types of pain? What does that do when she has, as someone else I know and love, really bad appendicitis? And it's like, well, this is a similar level to my period pain. And then it takes a while to distinguish, actually, I'm not on it, I don't have a period, this is not my normal period pain, it's not in the same place, what does that look like, what do I do now? And how that then all intertwines on that, like, well, I'm expecting it to feel like this, I'm expecting this level of pain. And other people watching it and being like, nah, I don't do that. If I was in that level of pain, I would be going somewhere to get help. And I just find that fascinating that in a couple dynamic or in a flat or with friends or whatever, one person's pain, everyone has a very different response. Because we're all socialised and have different expectations of what is and isn't normal and what to do. And then you take that back and say, like, what happened when you were little? And everyone has such different responses of, if you say, like when you were 10, say, and you felt sick before going to school, what was your parents' response? Was it like, okay, up you go to bed? Was it go to school and see how you feel? Was it, well, you haven't been sick, so you're fine? What did that teach you about where pain on a spectrum is? I'm like, that's something that I find fascinating talking to people and realizing that actually we've all got really different expectations of what should happen when you're in pain. At some point, I taught myself, I think, that I know you should just keep going, you shouldn't tell people you're in pain. Maybe too many times of being told that I had a low pain threshold. I went, okay, cool, I'll keep going. And then I got to university and made friends who were all kind of like, oh yeah, you're in a lot of pain. Like, A, painkillers, B, sit the hell down, please, Alison. And it gave me a new set of expectations of like, oh, actually, I'm allowed to be like, sorry, I'm tapping out, I'm in pain, I'm going to sit down. Or like, I'm not going out of bed this morning, I will see you at midday when I've had a nap and I feel a bit better. And what does that mean for us? And so even the like external biases, the internal ones, what have you been taught is normal from school teachers and parents and friends and experiences and TV and everything else? And that just gave me such a fascinating thought process of what do I do when I'm in pain, and therefore how do I treat other people when they tell me they're in pain? And I'm thinking, well, it doesn't look like you're crying, so maybe you're okay, versus like, okay, well, you're telling me you're in pain, so what can I do to help you? Are you more or less compassionate when it's someone else? Can you think of times where you've had two people have a similar problem, but you've treated them differently because maybe there was something different about the way they explained it, or how they looked, or what had happened? And that all comes together into our experiences, but sometimes it's quite hard unless we're in somebody else's shoes, literally, to know, oh, this is what their experience would have felt like. It feels like ours is the only one exists, rather than ours is such a tiny slice of that, and everyone else has such different experiences of that same event and what that looks like. And so I'm hoping those really short stories gave you a chance to think at times how you treat others, what you consider to be severe versus normal, but also a chance to think when you're doing things, designing things, talking to people, developing, whatever it is, have you thought about all the different types of people that are going to interact with this? Because this sheer frustration started with that a lot of our medication is built for your like average man, I think 70 kilos, and and so it doesn't, I mean, well fit anyone, to be honest, but really doesn't well fit the 50% of the population who aren't male. Never mind people who aren't the same weight and race and everything else our reference man is. But have you built for reference man? Have you built for reference man and woman? Have you built for reference different ages and weights and incomes and races and everything else? And have you got other people who are those to be able to tell you? Because I was very aware as I was talking that these are totally my own experiences built by who I am. And so I can't, like I can talk to you about the theory and the experiences that other people have talked to me about, but I haven't been in those shoes and I couldn't be. And so being very aware to be like, this is somebody else's story that I'm using to help explain the scenario. And so have you made sure that you've got those people as well contributing, and you haven't been thinking, well, I'm pretty sure they experience it this way? Because how sure? And what does it look like? And so that to me has been really fascinating to think about. When we're talking about pain in a classroom, are we thinking about the different experiences people have? And when we're developing products, have we tested and thought about the full spectrum of different types of people that are interacting and the experiences they have? So I hope you find that a bit of a tongue teaser, or a little bit interesting, maybe more a brain teaser, for looking at pain disparities. And I'll see you next week.